Who is Satan? Who is Allah? Satan in the Bible equals Allah of the Quran. So now we're not just content to say, our God is right, your God is wrong. Now, our God is God, and your God is the devil. So this is likes, dislikes, disabled, evolutionism, anti-science, lie. Interesting. Comments disabled, of course, always a bad sign. I don't know how many religions there are in the world, but according to Wikipedia, there are roughly 4,200. Could be more, could be less. Now, while I wheel through the main categories on that wiki article, I'll bring up a map showing the major religions of the world and their regions. Well, immediately we're going to come up against the classic. They can't all be right. But you're looking further at this, and this is why I don't like what I call generational religion. Like when Christian parents have Christian kids, and you know it's not an absolute choice, it's a culturally indoctrinated choice. But if you look at this map, and to get a real feeling of what this truly means, there's people in Israel who don't really even know who Jesus is. There's people in India who don't know who Allah is. There's people in the Middle East who've got no idea who Kali is. Now, I'm not saying Kali is the be-all and end-all of Hindu gods, but for all the millions of Hindu gods that there are, people in the West are generally not conversant with them. We simply don't know what they are, and yet they have the significance of Jesus and God to other people. It's an absolute thing. They don't even have an awareness of each other's religions particularly. So then comes the question, are there geographical limits to the gods? Does Krishna and Kali, etc., rule India? Does God rule America? Does Allah rule the Middle East? Does it work like that? And you would have to intuitively choose no. If you grow a carrot in America, you'll get a carrot. If you grow a carrot in England, you'll get a carrot. If you grow a carrot in Russia, you'll get a carrot. So why, if you grow a religion in America, or a religion in England, or a religion in Russia, do they come out differently? I would say this is not a sign that there are geographical limits to the gods. I would say this is a sign merely that there are different types of cultural indoctrination into religions. And that doesn't immediately poo-poo every religion. I haven't actually read Dawkins's book, The God Delusion, but I can surmise with a fair degree of confidence that what he said in there is that people have a psychological need to create meaning out of what is biologically a fairly meaningless existence. We are here merely to give rise to the next generation. If plants could talk and you ask them the meaning of life, that's what they would say. There is no cultural indoctrination. They do what they do and they die, and the next plants do the same thing behind them. This sort of endlessly pointless existence. And I assume that Dawkins has basically said, in order to live with this, we create meaning, and part of creating meaning is to create something bigger, more intelligent, and more benevolent than us, and say, it's a grand plan, everything's okay. If that's not what he said, feel free to tell me. Sometimes I assume what's in a book. Sometimes I get it right, and sometimes I get it wrong. I'd assume it's that. When I was in Kerala, is in southern India, when I was in Kerala, I heard a story. This guy had a dream of one of the Hindu gods, came to him and said, there's a bunch of money buried beneath this tree on this road, dig it up and it's yours. The next day he runs off out of his house with his spade, he digs it up and he finds some sort of stash, literally a bag of money. And this is sort of quite a famous story. Again, what is it? Is it if a Hindu god visits him in his dream and it turns out to be true, is there any reality to it? I would say on balance that he was either the thief who took the money in the first place, or he came upon the information by other means, and this was his cover story, so he didn't have to have it linked to a certain robbery and had to give it back. But if that wasn't the case, if the story's actually true, and it could be, do we have to respect the geographical or cultural limits of the gods? No, I don't think so. It's not an intelligent argument to say that there are geographical limits of the gods, because in each one of these geographical regions they're claiming their god is universal, and they're not just on this planet, for the whole universe. But doesn't that sound similar? If Krishna is consciousness, if God is divine essence, if Allah is the benevolent creative force, if the Native American's great spirit is the benevolent creative force, if the Aborigines' dreaming time is the great benevolent force, are we looking at differences here which are superficial? If we wiped away all these different colours and replaced them with belief in a great benevolent divinity behind creation, they would probably all be the same colour. So is that the carrot? You grow a religion in one area, a religion in another area, a religion in another, it becomes different and distorted and ritualistic and dogmatic over time, but it is essentially the same belief at the root source. Is that what we're dealing with? Because if it is, then we have to take this discussion one step further and say, why, who is saying these things and on what authority? You may be aware that most prophets or messiahs have life-changing epiphanies at some point. In the Bible, people often run off into the desert and have these experiences and come back and start preaching. Buddha sat underneath a Bodhi tree meditating and attained enlightenment. People do fairly unusual things, then come back and preach about them. Now, this is a description of a bipolar mania. Everything is brighter, smells more potent, looks bigger or distorted, sounds better. The world takes on a brittle quality and my mind makes connections between topics with light speed. I find meaning in the smallest insignificance. Nothing seems real and I feel like I am dreaming. I can hear the birds, the sand, the ocean, the plants, even tea sometimes, whisper to me. I feel like I'm getting closer to truth, to God. It can be sublime. I feel a euphoria not describable in words, a high unattainable elsewhere. Everything takes on a new significance and I think everyone is smarter than they are, speaking in tongues and riddles with great and sacred meaning. Time passes strangely, usually very slowly. I get obsessed with time. My perceptions are very different and I feel I can read people's minds. I feel connected with the great beyond and I become obsessed with the void. I see the world as a cosmic play, myself a puppet and the puppet master. This is a fairly standard explanation of a bipolar mania, and this transcendent quality often appears from people who describe the manic state. Now there are other types of manic state. There's more paranoid versions, there's hypermania, there's full-on losing touch with reality, leads to psychosis. You know, it's not all good. Although having said that, this high state is the reason that some bipolar people don't take their medication, because they enjoy feeling like this and don't want it taken away. Now, wouldn't you think that someone who runs off into the desert and has a bipolar mania like this, believe it, come back and start telling people what they've seen? Now the next question, we're culturally indoctrinated to consider a bipolar mania as part of an illness. But is it a temporary state of being able to see the truth, confused only by the fact that we don't live with these things on a day-to-day basis? Let's have an even closer look. Let's say this is the body. You see why I don't fucking animate now. Or try not to. This is the body. Put it in a big fucking thing here. How the body works is by sending impulses to some sort of central processor. You say, how much free will have we got? Our tummy will bitch and moan when we're hungry. Like that saying in the life of Pi. Hunger will teach you things about yourself that you don't want to know. Hunger can get so bad that you will pretty much do anything. And I was out and about, I ran out of money and places to stay and stuff like this. One day without food had me begging in shops. Hunger is just crazy intense. It will kind of take you over. We've also got our heart, So we never choose who we love, who we fall in love with. That shit just happens to us. I'll do the mind in a minute, but let's say this thing can feel pain. It's constantly sending signals and trying to sort of influence your behaviour. Well, okay, let's have that as well. That little bastard will get you into a lot of trouble if you listen to it. This is not a single entity. This is a committee. You know, the human body and the way it works and interacts with our will tends to lead to similar patterns of behaviour. Now, let's have the mind. This can be the mind. All this shit sort of reporting in. The mind is a strange thing itself. The mind will tell you all kinds of conflicting shit. The mind will tell you, go out, go and get that bitch, go and get that woman. It will feed your ego. It will say, chat up that woman, make a pass at your mate's wife. You know, it's always coming out with this shit. And then when you do it, your mind turns round and says you shouldn't have done that and puts you on a massive guilt trip. It will keep you awake at night, making you feel fucking guilty with these fucking images and shit about stuff the mind told you to do in the first place. The mind is almost a bastard. It's very contradictory. Always telling you do this, do that. And they're different things from one minute to the next. Sometimes you think something and then you think, that was fucking stupid, and you think something else against it. But what I'm getting to is the mind turning out this contradictory crap is impermanent in the sense that it varies from day to day, from minute to minute. The mindset is different. So we've got the committee of flesh, we've got the mind that sometimes makes no fucking sense whatsoever, and we've got something else. Part of us is aware of the mind and aware of the body, and that part of us sees everything. So what is it? What's this? Is it awareness itself? The feeling of being alive, being aware, is that the root thing that we are? And if it is, body's inconstant, the mind is inconstant, your awareness is constant. If this is awareness, then that's all we are. That's what we actually are. And the only other question really is awareness universal, eternal, or is it just a function of the mind? That is where we get the whirlpool theory. If you think about a rock, just some piece of crud on the floor, a collection of chemicals, minerals, that differs from the human body in what way? Different chemicals, minerals, which would make a human, in biological terms, a human being would be a clockwork, a machine. It would go about its business. There would be no free will. It might appear to have free will in the way it goes about its business, but free will would be an illusion. It would act exactly the same way in the same situations over and over again. And there's some evidence to back this up. People exhibit personality traits from birth. People exhibit the same types of choices throughout their life. What we call personality. Personality of the individual can be mechanical, simple biochemistry. And this is the sort of delusion that people fell into when science started gaining so much traction, and saying, well, you've reduced us to atoms and chemicals and taken the magic out of life. Well, no, it didn't. It was just examining what's here. It was thoughts, it was bullshit. People were coming up with this crap, saying, oh, we've got a reductionist outlook now. We're just biological machines. Well, we are. If you think that, if you want to think that, we are. If you're offended because science debunks the shit that's written in your holy book, and you want to say that as a way of saying it's not much fun, we'll say it. But science hasn't said that there's no divinity in life. It is just looking at what it can see. The whirlpool theory is that consciousness is not real, is an illusion, is an effect of the body to make it seem alive, to make it feel alive. Call it a whirlpool because you can't find consciousness, you can't find awareness as a thing in the same way that a whirlpool has this shape, form and function. What we call a whirlpool, there's nothing there. It's a gap in the water. What makes the whirlpool is the substances and the forces around it. What we identify as a whirlpool is nothing. As I'm saying, this is a theory that this bit is nothing, is an illusion of our physical makeup. One theory. or it could be divinity. That spark of life, the actual feeling of being alive, that could be universal. That could be divine principle. And we get these funny little things like, I think it's one of the Psalms, the cornerstone. You threw the cornerstone away because you thought it was useless. In historical terms, a cornerstone is just a little bit of a brick that could be mistaken for a piece of crud, but it's actually one of the most important parts of the whole building, oft times overlooked importance in the structure, which with all this going on, that would be. Now, where would somebody get that piece of information from? Are they getting that from a bipolar mania, which is a delusional state, or are they getting it from a bipolar mania which is a temporarily plugged into reality state, or are they getting it from an intuition which could be an illusion? Do you know what I mean? Wherever the information comes from, you can either support it or deny it as much as you like. There's nobody to say this is real apart from your own experiences, and even if you have your own experiences, you could be having a bipolar mania, which may or may not be true, which may or may not be a link with reality. When you start looking at the reasons why people ask these questions and the reasons why people talk about these things, you just come up on more questions. That the very, very basic bottom line of this is people who trust their own experiences of divinity, people who trust their own insight and intuition, and have come out of it and saying, I believe what I experienced there. I believe this is divine. I believe the mind plays tricks. I believe you have to sort of put that in a bubble of its own. I'm going to fucking put this on. This has got your ego in it. This has got your divinity in it. And there's your body. People are basing this on experience. And the only question is, if you believe them, what else is true? If you don't believe them, does it even matter? Because if they're right, you'll live forever anyway. You will live forever and ever and ever, because you are life itself. If they're wrong, you won't. And it's as simple as that. But you won't get to the truth of matter simply by liking the sound of something. Everything can be questioned. So it's quite possible all these these religions that sound similar at their root could be right. They could all be wrong. But a lot of the followers are talking shit because they're taking the text written from people who observed the behaviour, not from people who were giving it direct. You know, talking to a Jesus or a Buddha or someone like this, you'll get a version of the truth. And it will come with the sort of authority mentioned in the Bible. Read Jesus' teachings. He spoke with more authority than the Pharisees. What is authority in that context? You would say authority is a knowingness. He's talking like he knows. He knows the physical world is part of a much greater divinity. The soul is derived from an ancient Greek word which simply meant aliveness. And you can be aware of your own aliveness, you experience your own aliveness all the time. This is it. This is your own aliveness in some ways. At the end of this, you are left simply with a choice. Life may be divine and eternal. There may be a benevolent creator behind the universe. We talk about, God is a prick because AIDS exists, because children die of starvation, yada yada yada. What if that is a thimble in the ocean? A child dies, it's disgusting, suffering's terrible, it's like a moral crime. But their aliveness just goes on. The whole universe has the same aliveness. It pops in and pops out. It's nothing. It wasn't personal. The suffering was a blip in the billions of years that this thing plays out. So it looks horrible to us when we listen to this and our heart as well. But this is when, the moral man will then say, you fucking prick, I'm going to put you in the corner and make you starve to death, and you'll see how divine and beautiful you think it is then. Point taken. It wouldn't be divine and beautiful to go through, but that doesn't mean it's impossible for there to be divinity in this world, or even all the way through, stitched all the way through it. And we know a lot of what we call evil behaviour is a product of this fucking thing, the mind. Want, desire, you want to steal something, you want to kill someone, you want to attack someone, you want to rape someone, these desires have come from the body, mind. No fucking way did they come from awareness. They didn't come from the root cause. So if you've got a religion that's telling you that the devil whispers in your ears all the time, maybe there's something in that. If you've got a religion telling you to resist temptation, who's resisting temptation if temptation comes from the mind? It's this again. This part of you which watches all this playing out. Your very aliveness could be what you actually are. Or it could be a whirlpool. It's a brilliant question, and for the most part we can't answer it. And even if you did feel confident about answering it, you'd be answering it based on your own experiences, which themselves may be faulty. So I'm not impressed with these bastards who go off cocksure of themselves, pick up the Bible, say every fucking word's true. Honestly, I don't think they have any understanding what they're talking about. So, all of that was a massive load of context to say, I believe that this is the divine spark. Or divine spark, a part of the divine flame, I suppose. I believe it's all divine. And in that way, you could call me a theist of sorts. Now, people wanted me to explain what I meant when I did a sort of an atheist type video and said that I wasn't an atheist right at the beginning of it. I actually am on the side of I believe this is what people are referring to as God. I think it's also awareness. It's also consciousness. I don't really hold with the whirlpool theory, though I think it may be correct. And I think, yes, it is essentially a benevolent universe based on the fact that life was free. You know, entry is free. It's a free ride. It's everything is a gift. Everything we experience in a gift-like capacity. Life is given to us. Everything comes inward. The sound that you hear, the things you taste, the things you touch, all of your senses receive. You're receiving all the time. It's set up to be a giving universe. And that's the link that I put into it. I think the bipolar manias are a glimpse of reality because they jive almost with transcendental meditation. Zen Buddhism spend a lot of time basically quieting the mind, what they call the monkey mind, the mischievous monkey, calming that in order to calm desire. And you would say, well, why? Because they want this. They want to be this. They want to be expressive of their actual divine nature. That's what I believe. So in a way, you could call me a theist, but it takes me a long time to explain what I mean when I say that. Kind of theist, yeah. It doesn't necessarily have to be a god. I don't know how much intelligence you could attribute to this. I don't know how much planning, how much purpose. Certainly, if what I believe is true, then God would never be the sort of thing to take sides in a war. These things are products of ego and mind and resource wars, fighting over food and economic shit. God would not have a dog in that fight. Okay, so having said all that, we laid out my particular belief and justified it. I'm going to look at this other guy's fucking video about is Allah the devil, which is so fucking numpty-ish. The thinking is on such a base and shitty level. It has to be, I think it has to be trolling. But if it's not trolling, it's representative of this certain type of religious thought, which is so ignorant that people should shun it wherever they go. Honestly, I can't stand this stuff, and that's why I picked this video out to rip on it. But it was also a good chance to explain this and what I believe in it. Otherwise known as the two religions at the top of my head. One of them I agree with and the other one I don't, so I'm going to talk smack. I'm going to assume that that bit of Arabic on the right is Arabic for Allah, and this sliding a serpent type thing onto it to make it look roughly the same is some sort of seed planting. But that looks more like a Chinese dragon to me. It doesn't look like any representation of the devil. This doesn't even make sense. Lol, fucking... oh... Ezekiel 28:12. Okay. Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, Thou sealest up the sum, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. That is Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 12. Nothing to do with the devil. It's fucking more to do with the coming Son of Man, I think, by the looks of it. The next one's nothing to do with it either. Anointed cherub covered thee so thy... What the fuck? You haven't even got the source material right. And this is before we get into the whole God created man in his image, whereas angels, they don't have a soul or free will. That's why they were jealous of humans. So how can an angel be the most glorious creature God ever made? And God wasn't. Let's do a little keyword search on glory of God in the King James Bible. These are the 63 results. God has showed us his glory and his greatness. It goes on and on, obviously. It's what the fucking Bible does. The Quran, 1173. They said, Are you amazed at the decree of Allah? May the mercy of Allah and his blessings be upon you, people of the house. Indeed, he is praiseworthy and honourable. Another quote, citation, which is wholly fucking inaccurate. It's an interesting point, this. Angels are mighty. Angels are kind of like foot soldiers. Badasses that God sends if he wants to raise a city to the ground. Or even kick off Armageddon. You know, the Roman version of Christian faith, around about the year 0, replaced religions which had pantheons of gods. The Roman religion, the Greek religion, the Zeus and Aphrodite and Mars and all this kind of stuff. What's the fucking difference? It's supposed to be monotheism. God is the be-all and end-all, yet he's got all these fucking sidekicks. How is it any different from Zeus and his bloody underlings? Angels are mighty. Angels are fucking immense badasses. One of the angels is permanently at war with God, having fallen from grace. What the fuck? It doesn't even really sound like monotheism. You don't say. Because Allah is supposed to be the same fucking God as God. The Quran is the sequel to the Bible, in so to speak. The Quran takes the prophets and events of the Bible and expands on them, and basically God says, I've changed my mind about a few things. I think it's Muhammad's questions him, like, you said this, that and the other, and now you're saying different things. How come? And God basically says to him, look, little dude, I'm God. I'm entitled to change my mind. Okay, it's not very convincing, but that's the story. Allah is mighty in the same way that God is mighty, because it's the same entity. This is flirting with strange language use here. Procreate, you could slip that through on a technicality, but most people associate procreation with sex. Procreation is like animal breeding. And in the sense that God of the Bible has a son, or God of the New Testament has a son, it isn't procreated, it's divine created. It's a sexless birth, it's a virgin birth. That's the sign of divinity that they take, really. So procreation is a really strange word to use for that, for alluding to that situation. But in a way, if you want to use procreate in the absolute sense of just creating new life, then both God and Allah take full credit for ultimate procreation, for the creation of the universe and everything in it. Ezekiel 28 verse 12. That sounds familiar. That's the same fucking passage you cited earlier. How did I know it was going to be Ezekiel 28:12? Okay, I think we've seen enough to spot a consistent flaw in this. I don't get how this is the pride of Allah. This is not. If you just switched it and put the pride of God, would it not be pretty much the same thing? Self-claimed creator, the Lord, the King. Self-claimed holy one, making. Well, let's switch those out and put stoning hoes and homosexuals legal. Self-claimed just while ordering murder and wife beating. Is that even true? Self-claimed compassionate but filled the Quran with hate speech. What about the poor Gentiles and the Philistines in the Bible? How much love speech was directed towards them? Self-claimed the Most High, spelt wrong. Is it self-claimed that if you turn up and act like God, is there an implication there that you're self-claiming? Because it would apply to God as well. I can't believe the numptiness of this video.